I'm Rob Skinner, and this is the Rob Skinner Podcast. In this episode, I interview Austen and Sarah Bolves, who are leaving soon, along with their two kids, Thaddeus and Rowan, to do missionary work in Berlin, Germany. Find out in this episode what gave them the idea to go overseas and how they prepared to preach the word in a foreign country. All this and more on the Rob Skinner Podcast. Welcome back to the Rob Skinner Podcast. My goal is to inspire you to live a no-regrets life, make this life count, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. I hope you're planning on going to the Climb Small Church Leadership Conference in Dallas, Texas, November 30th through December 3rd, 2023. It's going to be an amazing time to learn, to grow, to build relationships with other like-minded people, kingdom-minded disciples from around the world who want to grow, who want to learn, and who want to be their best for God. So I hope to see you in Dallas. Austen and Sarah, welcome to the program.
Hey Rob. Thank you.
This is so awesome because, Sarah, I know you from way back. Our families are deeply connected because your dad, Greg, and your mom, okay, we were in the same campus ministry together at UC Berkeley. So, I mean, your family's royalty in my book, and especially because your dad studied the Bible with me.
That's right.
Greg Bromley. So I am always deeply grateful for Greg. And so our families have kept up with each other over the years in the Northwest. And there's some funny parallels because your parents went on mission to Japan for a period of time, I think a year or two. And then we followed. We went there shortly after they went there. And so there's a connection there. And then I just remember really good times in the early part of the 2000s. My son David and James would come up and take part in campus teen activities. And I think you and David went to prom together or something like that. Wasn't that it?
Yeah, I took him to my senior prom.
Oh, that was awesome. Great memories. And so
fun.
Anyway, I'm always grateful. And so it's really amazing to me to see you grow up and you go on mission. I mean, this is really, really special. And then you married Austen. And so I look forward to kind of catching up with you guys in this program. How'd you guys become Christians?
Well, as you just kind of explained, I grew up in the church. My parents met in the Berkeley campus ministry. My dad was also a Kingdom kid. My grandparents, Ron and Linda Brumley, were in the ministry my whole life. My mom became a Christian in college. And so I grew up in the church and kind of lived all over the world with my dad's job, and then became a disciple in the teen ministry in the Seattle Church of Christ when I was 16, 15 years ago now, and went through the teen ministry and then the campus ministry in Seattle, which is where I met Austen.
That's where we met. Yeah, I was a freshman at the University of Washington when I got reached out to. I had grown up with Christian faith, but definitely no models of discipleship. So I studied the Bible my freshman year at, like I said, University of Washington. And then over the summer before my sophomore year, really started diving in and realizing I needed to change things, and got baptized August 19th, 2012. So it's 10 years ago now. So we met in the campus ministry at UW.
Yeah.
And that's how it all started.
Okay, so you guys are close in age, or?
Yeah, I'm just a year and a half older than Austen. So
okay, so were you like his Bible talk leader or something like that, Sarah?
We were in the same Bible talk.
We were in the same Bible talk. She was my Bible talk leader. It wasn't that scandalous.
I was helping to lead the Bible talk, and we were just really great friends. And then he started pursuing me. I didn't notice at first because I was just kind of oblivious. And he was the cool, really cute athlete in the campus ministry. So I didn't think that he would like me.
And I thought she was ineligible for a while. So to both of our chagrin, we realized we liked each other.
Yes.
That's awesome. Now, an athlete, did you play sports at UW?
Yeah, I was on the crew team there.
Oh my gosh. And that's a really great program.
They are.
Yes.
Yeah.
How many years did you row?
I rowed for 2 years. I got recruited to go there to row. And then at the end of 2 years, I actually did an internship over the summer at Camp Hope for Kids in Philadelphia. And over that summer, I kind of started to feel the itch for ministry and thinking, oh man, maybe the campus ministry back home really needs somebody to step up and be a leader, because Alex Whitaker was taking on bigger roles in the church, and our Bible talk leader had graduated. So I actually accepted an internship that fall of my junior year, and we had just started dating, and so we both were interns for the campus ministry, and I stopped rowing so that I'd be able to do more in leading the campus.
That's awesome. Okay, so you guys graduated from UW, and then what have you guys been doing up until now?
Yeah. So that internship in college turned into a job offer with the Seattle church.
Mm-hmm.
So we graduated and ended up going into ministry. That wasn't the initial plan necessarily, but she really didn't want to go into ministry, and I ended up realizing I really, really did. And so we stayed in Seattle for a bit and led kind of a small campus ministry. It was like a community college ministry and a small YoPros and singles ministry. It was sort of one of those, like, everybody that isn't married or teens go together in the suburbs. So we led that ministry for a while, and it was actually a ton of fun, and we saw a lot of growth. Mm-hmm. And then after about 2 years of that, got asked to move back downtown Seattle and lead the large campus ministry down there. And that has a couple different schools that are a part of it.
Yeah.
So did that for 4 years. 4 years. And then we just recently moved to Boston. It's kind of a stepping stone on our way to overseas missions. We paired up with the EMS, and they brought us to Boston. And so for the last year and a half, we've been campus ministers in downtown Boston.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask some questions about that. So what year did you guys get married?
2015.
2015. When did you graduate from college?
So I graduated in 2014 and actually worked in a secular job. I worked for the prosecutor's office, first in homicide and then in domestic violence. And then when Austen graduated in 2015, we got married, and that's when we went into the full-time ministry together.
Okay, so you were in Seattle for 4 years or 5 years?
We were in
the
Seattle
ministry?
in the ministry for 6 years.
Okay.
Yeah. We left for Boston in 2021.
Okay, so just a little over a year ago. Okay, so you went to Boston. When you say EMS, what's EMS?
Oh yeah, the European Mission Society.
Okay.
So yeah.
So okay, Seattle's an incredible city. We lived there for about a year and a half back in the day, early 90s. I mean, that's a lot of people right there. What got you interested in foreign missions? How'd you get this itch to go overseas?
Yeah. I mean, I had always kind of wanted to live overseas growing up. I remember just kind of realizing, like, wait, there are people that live in countries all over the world, and I don't know anything about them or their lives. And even just studying Spanish in high school, I was fascinated learning about different cultures and learning a different language. So I kind of always thought I'd love to live overseas. I'd love to throw myself into a new culture. And then studying the Bible and hearing all about our church being international and really trying to take the Great Commission seriously about making disciples of all nations, I was inspired kind of from the beginning of, like, I want to help God's message go all around the world. So that was always sort of something I had wanted, and it was always vague until we really felt the call to go into ministry. And then I started realizing, wow, if we're going to be in ministry, then this isn't just let me go live overseas and learn a new culture. This is like, I could actually be a part of making disciples of all nations. So it was sort of always something we wanted, at least I had always wanted. And her story is a little bit more. She was actually overseas for a while as a kid, but definitely from when I got baptized and we got into the ministry, it was clear to me this would be something that I would love to do.
Yeah. And I mean, like you said, my parents went over to Tokyo with Frank and Erica Kim just as a young married couple. They weren't in the ministry. They just wanted to go on an adventure and help study the Bible with people. And that's where I was born. And then with my dad's job with Walmart International, my family lived in Indonesia and Germany when I was a kid. And so I grew up seeing the international parts of the kingdom in a really powerful way. And it was super impactful for my faith. And so even before I knew I wanted to go into the full-time ministry, I'd always thought, how cool would it be to get to raise my kids in a foreign country and have them see that discipleship is the same regardless of the culture or the language. And it's so cool that now we get to do that in the mission field as foreign missionaries, getting to spread the gospel in such a tangible way.
Wow. That is so awesome. Now, I didn't know you guys had gone to Germany. I knew your dad spent time in Bentonville, Arkansas, which is the capital of Walmart right there. And that's awesome. So Indonesia, and your dad would come and visit in Tokyo doing his security work for Starbucks. I think he worked for, he's worked for every Fortune 500 company under the sun. But anyway, I don't want to go off on that tangent. Sarah, you said you didn't really want to go into the ministry. Looks like you're doing criminal justice, which as I remember, that's what your dad studied, criminal justice.
It was, yeah.
Okay, so how did you change your heart? And you got this guy who's really chomping at the bit to do ministry. How did you get your heart in line to go, okay, I'm gonna go after this?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I graduated from college, I got kind of my dream job working as a domestic violence victims advocate. And I had always had a heart to help people, especially people who came from really broken backgrounds. And when we had done our internship for the campus ministry, I loved it. I loved studying the Bible with women, but with my kind of eyes fixed on the legal world, I thought, this is how I'm going to change the world when I got this job as a victims advocate. But very quickly, I realized what all of these people needed, I was trying to help with the law, was Jesus. And I came home every day just heartbroken that I couldn't offer that to them. And so God really used this, what I thought was my dream being realized, to kind of show me what he really wanted me to do with this deep desire to help people, was to go into the full-time ministry. And during that year, right after Austen and I got engaged, the lead evangelist couple here in Seattle had us over for dinner, and they asked us, would you guys ever consider going to the ministry? And I realized that a lot of the reasons I didn't want that was fear. And I remember having a conversation with Austen, and he was so awesome just listening to all of the different fears I had about ministry. But then he very gently discipled my heart and was like, but what about God? What about the way that God could work through us? What about all of the times in the Bible God says, do not be afraid? And I decided I was not going to let fear be the reason I wasn't going to do something for God. And so we went into the ministry. I quit my job with the prosecutor's office, and I've honestly never looked back.
Really?
I can't imagine doing anything else. But it took a year of me being in a different role for God to really mold my heart, to show me where he was actually leading me.
Right. Well, it's interesting too, because I wouldn't say you come from kingdom royalty, but I mean, you definitely have deep roots in the Church of Christ and the International Church with your grandfather, Ron, and your grandmother, Linda. And I'm sorry about Ron passing.
Thank you.
Love both those guys so much. And then your dad, Greg, and then Lisa. So it's definitely, you're deep in it. I mean, we're talking like serious background. How now? What were your parents like? Did they say, "Oh yeah, you should do this," or And your mom, your grandmother, Linda, and I'm sure that Ron was probably alive when you were starting to consider this at that point.
Oh yeah, yeah. He was all over it. He was really, really excited, honestly. I think the fact that their legacy of being in the full-time ministry and what they had done with that was part of what inspired us, even seeing a really healthy version of that where their kids had all grown up and become Christians and married Christians. That was really appealing to me. And so their example played a huge role in that. And so they were so fired up. My grandmother still is so excited for us to go overseas. My parents have been incredible. Austin's parents have been super supportive. So we feel like we are going over to Germany with the full support of our family,
That's
which
awesome.
Means so much to us.
Yeah. And Ron and Linda knew we were going into ministry before we did.
Yeah.
They did a marriage retreat in a church in Texas. And the lead evangelist was like, hey, by the way, we're looking for a campus minister. Do you know anybody? And Ron and Linda told him, oh yeah, call my granddaughter and her husband. They're engaged and they're going to go into the ministry. They want to go. And I, coming from not the church culture that we have in our churches, that wasn't like a phrase that even made sense to me, like
Exactly.
go into the ministry.
Right.
She was thinking, I don't want to go into the ministry. And then we get this phone call from this brother in Texas going, hey, I heard that you guys want to be campus ministers.
Right.
And I was on the phone with him like, actually, that kind of sounds cool. I hadn't really thought about that. Who told you this? And who are you, by the way?
Oh my gosh.
And so that was what really started it for us, was actually their kind of nudge. They had this dream for us that, looking back now, it was totally the Holy Spirit just connecting dots. But
okay, so let's go back to this trip you've got planned to go to Berlin. Like, you've got 2 kids. It'd be easy for you just to stay where you're at. And how did you know, like, okay, we need to go to Berlin or or even anywhere overseas, rather than you could have just stayed parked right where you're at the University of Washington. There's a whole bunch of work to be done there. I mean, as there are campuses across the country. How do you make a decision like that where you go, it's not between good and bad, it's between, I don't know, it's not really it's not a good or bad decision. It's like it's good both ways, but it's just different. How'd you wrestle through that decision-making process and figure out what God's will was?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'm still continuing to see the pieces fall together that give me more clarity. We definitely knew after all this wrestling and different things that we wanted to be in the ministry. And so we sat down with Darren and Carla Overstreet, who at the time were leading the church in Seattle. And they said, hey, we'd love you to stay here in the ministry and get trained. And I was like, I don't want to stay in Seattle. It's too rainy and gray. I want to go somewhere else. And they were the ones who kind of said, like, well, hey, think about this question. Where could you do the most for God?
That's a great question.
And that question stuck with me. I remember we were doing like pre-marriage counseling, and I went back to class, and I was just like, I don't think I could do anything with my life that's more impactful for God than full-time ministry. And that's not true for everybody, I don't think. No. But I did feel really clearly that was true for us. And that was being revealed to her, like she shared. And so they encouraged, hey, if you want to do this, if you want to go somewhere, that's great, but stay here and get trained. Like, don't just go flying off somewhere. Stay here and get trained where we can really build you up. We already know you. Your marriage can grow. You guys can learn what it means to lead a campus ministry. We can train you with the mindset of you want to go somewhere someday. So that was really from the beginning. And of course, there were opportunities to change our mind. And there were even conversations about, are you sure you don't want to change your mind and stay here? But we continued to feel this pull overseas. I remember going to an ICMC, and Marty Wilkinson got up and he talked about, like, if you have this desire, do you realize how rare you are?
Right.
Like, if you can speak a foreign language, or you have a desire to learn a foreign language, if you have a desire to live in a culture besides your own, do you realize how rare you are for wanting to do that? And again, in my head, I I became a disciple sort of thinking this is what this church is all about, right? Isn't this what everybody wants to do?
Right.
And then being in the ministry and meeting some of my friends and even in the ministry, we're like, oh, that's awesome, but I don't want to move overseas. Like, I want to lead a church in my hometown, or I want to lead the campus ministry where I went to school. That's an amazing dream, and I'm glad for those people that want to do that. And that's what God is calling them to. But I started to realize, like, it's not a given. People aren't lining up to go help these churches overseas that they don't have the training we have. They don't have the resources. They don't have the people. I mean, they struggle even just to get people who want to be Bible talk leaders as college students, let alone graduate and go into the ministry.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, who's sending you, and where are you getting your funding to go? Like, talk a little bit about the details of this.
Yeah, we're going through, like I said, the EMS, which is the European Mission Society, and it's in partnership with the Boston Church. So when we left Seattle in 2021, we went to Boston because we knew from there we would get sent to Europe. We actually didn't know where we would go when we got to Boston, but we started getting discipled by Kevin and Melissa Miller, and they are leading the Boston Church, but also on the board of the EMS. And so they have a really good idea of what's going on all around Europe. And slowly they were doing a lot behind the scenes to let God's will be revealed on where would be good for us. And ultimately the EMS kind of pitched to us Berlin. And so we prayed and fasted and went to Berlin and visited the church. And through all that, it was, there were a couple of things that were very, very clear that was the place for us to be.
Like what?
Yeah, it's mostly Berlin and EMS.
You say a couple things made it clear. What were those things?
I had a phone call with Kevin. This was a big one. I was really reluctant to go to Berlin initially. I was nervous about it being gray and rainy, just like Seattle. And I wasn't really sure why, but Kevin was like, if you can't express why, then maybe you just need to go to God and really lay down your heart and make sure you're being humble. And so we had a conversation about how being a missionary and being a campus minister is about finding the remnant. Like Paul talks about in Romans, that there's like a remnant of people. And you're not going to save every single person, but we have to find those who really God has chosen and want to be saved. And so we kind of get in a fight almost about why I'm being so stubborn about where I'm going to go in Europe or not going to go. And he goes, you just need to go be humble, go pray about it, and God will make it clear. So we have this remnant conversation. He kind of challenges me. I go off on a prayer walk. I'm walking through the streets of Boston. I'm right next to Fenway Park, and I see this guy walking towards me with a T-shirt that has like a rowing company on it, which is pretty niche, right? And so I stop him. I'm like, oh, I should reach out to this guy. We start talking, and he's got an accent. I'm like, well, where are you from? He goes, well, I'm from Germany.
Whoa.
I'm like, okay, this is going to sound crazy to you, but I was literally just praying about if I should move my family to Berlin. So I'm curious, what is like the perception of Berlin and spirituality amongst your peers in Germany? Because he wasn't from Berlin. And he goes, well, when me and my friends all graduated high school, people know that like Berlin is really, there's no standard of living and there's no right or wrong. And so I cut him off and I went, oh, so they all wanted to go there? And he goes, no, none of them did. Because we know that that's not right. And this guy like wasn't even open. I mean, he's not even religious, but he's like, we know that's not right.
When you say standard of living, what do you mean by that?
Like just a standard of morality, a sense of right and wrong.
I see. So it's just
really
a wild place,
being like just hedonism and anarchy within like the young people and just like what you can do, just debauchery and revelry kind of thing. And so that struck me. I was like, wow. I pictured kind of Berlin as this, at least within the secular world in Berlin, is kind of this hedonistic capital of Europe. And here's this guy, an 18, 19-year-old telling me like, my friends from Germany know that's wrong. But it just made me think about all the folks who did go there because they thought they wanted that. And now they're trapped. Where they grew up in Berlin and couldn't get out. And now they're just stuck in that world where like the culture is telling them constantly, hedonism is right. There's no standard of morality. And I thought, well, that's the remnant me and Kevin talked about. And this was the humbling moment I needed to see that Berlin is totally where I need to go. And actually where I now, like in that moment, I was like, now I desperately want to go.
Wow. It's kind of, it was like a Man of Macedonia type encounter.
Oh, it was 100%. Yeah.
Definitely.
It was like a goosebumps God moment. I called Sarah. I was like, I'm going to go somewhere and journal for a while. I'll be home in a few hours. It was awesome.
Okay. I just got to ask though, because, okay, I know Seattle's rainy. I've lived there and it's gray for sure. But Berlin, from my impression, it's, overcast a lot, can be very gray and dreary. Not to mention Seattle is super secular. I mean, post-Christian as in comparison to other parts of the United States. And then you're going to Europe and Berlin, although it has a history of Christianity over, back in the day, starting with Martin Luther, and then, anyway, I don't want to get into it, but I mean, that's history. Now it's just super secular. So, I mean, you guys could have chosen like an easier path. Let's go to Indonesia. Everyone wants to get baptized there. And I mean, you guys really chose a hard field.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's obviously no easy mission field, but to your point, that was kind of one of the dots that clicked for me is God had been preparing us for this calling for a long time. Way back on the Overstreet's couch when they said, stay in Seattle and we'll prepare you to go somewhere. We realize now looking back, that was the Holy Spirit. I mean, Berlin and Seattle are so comparable. The Greens were in Seattle actually, and Seattle sent them to Berlin. And that was kind of their last missionary post before Scott had to come back and get treatment because he was sick. And they always would talk about that. Berlin is so much like Seattle. And so now we're so grateful that we had all this time in Seattle, and it's so clear that God was using the similarities in these cities to prepare us for this place that he really wanted us to go.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's intense. Okay. So can you talk a little bit about the process? Like you were thinking about this in Seattle I think there are a lot of people who are like, that I do talk to and they're like, I'd really like to go overseas. But the problem is by default, it's much easier just to stay where you're at, to keep doing what you're doing. If you seek advice from your church leader, that church leader 9 times out of 10 is like, hey, I need you here. It's not like they're like, yeah, go on, take off, and we'll find 10 more people like you. It's not like that. I mean, to find talented workers, it's challenging. So how did you steel yourself against, I hate to say guilt trips or, people saying, oh, you shouldn't do that. It's going to mess up your kids. It's going to be tough on your kids. Or, how did you just kind of pull up the roots when it would have been much easier by default just to stay right where you're at?
Yeah. Yeah. I think to your point, it definitely wasn't, if we had just kept going in the natural course and rolling with the flow, we would still be in Seattle. We would probably still be leading the campus here. And that would have been fine.
Yeah.
But we could not ignore this intense longing in both of our hearts for something else, for something different. And we kind of just decided we have to fight for this. And, Seattle's mission partner is the Middle East, and they said, we don't want to hire Americans. So we kind of knew, okay, if we want to do foreign missions, we're going to have to go somewhere else inside the U.S. family of churches with a mission partner that does want to send young American missionaries. And we definitely had a lot of conversations with Darren and Carla. They were so supportive, but wanted us to stay here. They wanted to continue to be able to train us here in Seattle. But we just kind of kept being adamant of God is calling us to this. And to their honor and glory, they were so supportive and said, okay, start emailing people then. Here's what you should do. And so in the beginning of 2020, we sent out a bunch of emails to church leaders all over the world saying, this is something on our hearts. Do you have anything? And the only people to get back to us were the people within the European Mission Society: Doug Arthur, Valder Koha, Sean Wooten. And so we started talking with them, and it kind of became clear that going to Boston first was going to be a great way for us to build relationships, get some connection, get a little bit more hands-on training for missionary work, and then get launched into Europe. And so that's what we've done the last year and a half. But it definitely wasn't easy. I think especially as a young mom, I mean, we started this process when I was 7 months pregnant with our first child.
Wow.
And now we're about to move to Germany with a 2.5-year-old and a 5-month-old.
Wow.
And it is terrifying. Definitely. And there's been so many times, honestly, where I have asked myself, why am I doing this?
Right.
This is crazy.
Right.
It would be so much easier to have stayed here in Seattle, where both of our families are, or even now to stay in Boston. We have loved our time in Boston, and it has felt way too short. But I think we just can't ignore this calling that we hear from God, and all of the things, all of the doors that he's opened, all of the connections with the Greens or me living in Germany as a kid, all of these little things that God has laid out to show this path so clearly to us. It's kind of honestly not really up to us. I just feel like we just have to faithfully walk out what God has so clearly laid before us and see what he does with it.
Okay, so I've got a lot of follow-ups there. First of all, I mean, weren't you a little bit nervous that you're going to go to Boston and they're going to say, hey, you need to stay here for an additional 3 years and just get some extra training? I mean, it's like, how did you avoid that? I mean, how did you stay on track and still go overseas?
Yeah. I mean, the Boston church is amazing. And just for reference, Sarah kept saying here is Seattle. Our current church is Boston.
Right.
Yes.
We're on vacation in Seattle.
Got it.
So just if anybody's getting confused why we keep mixing that up.
Right.
But on our way to Boston, we made it clear to them, we want to come to get trained to go overseas. And it was almost like the EMS and Boston and us were working together to try to find a great situation. And that partnership has continued to work together to find a great situation, not only for us in Boston, but now in Europe. And so from the moment we arrived in Boston, Kevin Miller and the whole staff was just talking about, okay, we got to get you ready. We want you to go. They have a reputation of sending young ministers off into Europe, and they've continued to try to do that better with greater and greater success. And so really they've worked hard to get us there. Honestly, like sometimes I'm scratching my head at how much Kevin has done in his role as an EMS board member for us.
Yeah.
Because he does so much, just as a church leader as well. And we threw ourselves into the campus ministry there to really try to make as big of an impact as we could while we were there. We didn't want it to just feel like, a layover in life. And we saw a lot of amazing things happen there. Wow. But
what's really commendable that they didn't sideline you or divert you into something else. That's impressive. And it's impressive that Darren and Carla directed you and gave you, the initial steps to do that. So that shows a lot there. What did you do to get ready for the mission? You talked about campus ministry. You're there about a year, I guess. I mean, what were you doing specifically to get ready to go overseas?
Yeah, so we got put in Boston, the downtown campus, and Boston, this is kind of new. They tried something new since we arrived. We were working with a staff of, 8. We were 2 of 8 campus ministers in one region downtown. The campus ministry was like 60, 65 when this team took it over. And it was really all about like, okay, let's just see how much we can grow this thing. So we've split it up into smaller ministries and really just tried to grow. And it's been amazing. Since we got to Boston, there's been 60 baptisms, 59 or 60 baptisms in that like year and a half from the 60-person campus ministry.
Wow.
Which has just been amazing. So one, I think it really helped us open our minds to what God can do and just see what faith is really capable of.
Absolutely.
But also working with this team, we had been really always just leading the ministry kind of on our own with a little bit of autonomy within this bigger church, but to work with a team of ministers. And then we were running kind of point between Kevin, who was discipling the campus ministry, and all the other campus ministers. So we were like equal, but trying to manage a lot of the communication lines and a lot of the priorities with the whole Boston church, with the downtown region that we were a part of, even though we were kind of working in the region, but a bit separate from it because there were so many of us. We were like our own little mini region in a way. And so the complexities of that, if anybody, is a church leader, you're going to hear that and scratch your head because it is complicated. But it was such great practice for us.
Yeah.
And the Boston church put us in that role on purpose because the Berlin church and a lot of the European churches are led largely by these teams, like leadership teams.
Yeah.
And that's been something that has continued to be a mark of success for folks who go overseas is, are you able to integrate yourself into the leadership team and win them over and be able to kind of work with them in a way that's productive? Yeah. And so really the last year and a half has been us learning that, which was entirely new, but we've seen it obviously be abundantly fruitful.
Right.
And we're so grateful for the team we had in Boston because, those are some of our best friends now, and we have memories that we'll just cherish forever from being with them in Boston.
So you're working in a team leading a small region. Is that what I hear you saying?
See, that's how complicated it is. No, we are in the downtown region of the Boston church, which is, it's a normal region of a church. It's got pros, it's got marrieds, teens, campus. But in the downtown region, there's the campus ministry, and that campus ministry has 8 campus ministers.
Okay.
And so we were on that team of 8 campus ministers in the downtown region of the Boston church. And the downtown region is led by Stuart and Ashley Maines, but the campus group was discipled directly by Kevin and Melissa Miller. So it was like, we were in the region, but being discipled by the head lead evangelist who was ministry leader. So we were not a separate region, but being discipled.
Okay.
That's really hard to describe.
I understand. But okay, that. I think that's good enough. So you're heading out. I want to go back to you, Sarah, because that's really gutsy. You got little kids. You're still going. I just talked to Amanda Henderson in Rio de Janeiro. She's got little kids. I was like really inspired. This used to happen with more frequency, but it's really rare now to go with little kids. Pam, my wife Pam, David was like, 6 weeks old when we went to Tokyo. It was, but wow. It's definitely the exception. So it's really inspiring. How have you just prepared mentally to take these little kids and just uproot?
A lot of prayer, definitely. I think a lot of vulnerability with the women in my life, just expressing my fear. There's so many different things that can come into my head of, is this the right decision for them? How is our toddler going to adapt to all of a sudden not being able to understand anybody? We're taking them away from so much stability and familiarity. But I think I've just kept coming back to, I have to trust that if God is calling us to this, God is calling our whole family to this.
Right.
And if he wants to use us in this way, I need to trust that he's going to take care of our kids and that this is going to be a really powerful part of their faith journey.
Right.
Because obviously our number one priority, our biggest prayer in life is that both of our children will become disciples. And so I think, again, going back to, I had to quiet my fears and make that, put those aside to go into the full-time ministry. I've really had to do that in order to be faithful and confident moving our young family to Germany.
Right. It's so cool. I'm inspired because I think this is probably the bottleneck or the barrier or the sticking point for many, many couples who would love to go overseas. They'd love to have an adventure. Maybe the husband is like dying to go, But there's this fear like, but what about the kids? And I think that it's so easy to be kid centered and not Christ centered. It's like, okay, it's all about the kids. We can't upset our kids. We they got to be in bed by 7 p.m. We can't do this. It's going to mess up their schedule. And I think it's a great example for people. And I think, is there anything that, if you could talk directly to a mom who's considering it and thinking like, I'd like to, but it really scares me, what would you tell her?
When my brother and I were little and my parents took us over to Indonesia, I'm sure there was so much fear, especially in my mom's heart, of what that was going to be like for us. But all I remember was how much fun we had and how joyful and faithful my parents were. And so I think translating that, to my kids, especially when they're little, as a parent, you are their home. And they're going to follow you and feel safe with you and feel confident with you wherever you lead them, if you're feeling safe and confident and at peace with God. And I think that's something I really had to lean into. That's not my natural inclination. But I think I'm really faithful that if I follow where God is leading me and I bring my kids along with me, they're going to just think this is the coolest adventure ever.
Right.
And it's going to build so much depth in our family, but they're going to get to see us do something uncomfortable and sacrificial for God while also seeing us live out something that we're so excited about and passionate about.
Yeah.
I think there's not really anything better you can do for your kids, honestly.
Oh, I'm 100% with you. I just feel like, I have such a strong conviction about this. Like, if you as parents are engaged, you're passionate, you're fired up about God, that can't help but seep into your family, your kids. They sense it. They can tell when their dad's checked out, when their dad or their mom are just kind of going through the motions, and the dad is just chasing the money or whatever. But they can also sense it when the parents are like, this is exciting. It's not easy. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it's thrilling and it's meaningful.
Yeah.
And I've never regretted the decisions we've made. We've moved all over the place, overseas, domestically, planting church. And I just go, it's the right move. I just really, really commend you for what you're doing, Sarah. I think it's really inspiring.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's get down to nuts and bolts here. What steps does a person need to take if they feel like there's something inside, they maybe not even know where they want to go, but I know I've talked to people and they're like, we want to go overseas. We don't know where to go. They're in their 30s. They've got kids. Where do you start? What do you do? Just talk me through. Give me a 5-step plan or a 3-step plan or whatever. Give me some bullet points here.
Yeah. Well, I think starting how we started is great. Just reaching out to people who know what the needs are. We actually, you mentioned Indonesia. We sent an email to Harlem in Indonesia. We sent an email to Sean Wooten because we heard about his Revive program. We sent an email to Doug Arthur because I knew he was working with EMS. And so I think just reaching out to these people and trying to figure out where the needs are.
Yeah.
And then once that happens, then there's kind of this moment of they get back to you and go, oh yeah, we do have a need and you'd be great. And so then it gets to the heart work of like, is this an exciting thing that we talked about, or are we actually going to move forward in faith and deal with the fear and actually try to make this happen?
Yeah.
So I think if you get those connections and you start hearing what the needs really are and having honest, conversations about, could I go into this role? I know Sean Wooten, I think you mentioned it at the beginning of the podcast that you have some friends or some folks who are going on to his Revive program. I mean, he's constantly trying to get people to fill different roles.
Right.
And there are some churches and there are some programs that are doing this. Like Boston is really wanting to send a lot of missionaries over the next 10 years into Europe. We want to see Europe be completely revived. We want to see the churches in Europe be filled with trained leadership. And Sean is trying to do that in Eastern Europe. So, and I know that's just our circle, but there's so many people doing this elsewhere.
Okay. So first, just kind of like spread seed, communicate your ambition. And now I'm assuming that you also have to make sure that your husband or your wife is on the same page as you first before you step into this. You guys both decide, okay, we both want to go, right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay.
A lot of communication, prayer together. That was super, super important for us to make sure we were in lockstep the whole way and one of us wasn't running ahead of the other one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually did a whole lesson kind of on this at the Vision Conference, so people could go back and listen to it. But that was specifically for college students or folks who are young and wanting to do this. We're so glad now that we didn't just go off and fly overseas somewhere when we were brand new, married, green in the ministry. We're so glad that we had our first conversations with the local church we were in and voiced these ambitions, but then stayed, not only to give back to the church that had, given us everything, but to learn these skills, develop. We got appointed there. But even after all that time, we did feel, no, this calling is still on our heart. And so then we did the step of emailing out. So I guess depending on who in the audience is listening, maybe the next step really is just talking to your campus minister and saying, hey, I think I might want to go into the ministry. I think I might want to go overseas. Okay. If you've been doing that for a while, then maybe it's talking to your evangelist going, I think I might want to start emailing some mission societies. Who's our mission partner? What are their needs? And those are the conversations that might be needed.
Okay. But what about the money? Like, where do you get the money? How do you get the funding to go?
Yeah, we're blessed, again, with the European Mission Society. They have churches that fund them. There's lots that fund them. Two of the bigger ones are Chicago and Boston, which is why we came to Boston, because they said, well, if we're going to fund this, then we want to get our hands involved in training them to make sure it's going to be successful. So we are blessed. We didn't have to do the really grassroots call around, ask for money.
Didn't have to do the
self-funding. There are mission societies that cover basically the whole globe. Yeah. And there's an app, the All Nations app, and it has information about each of these mission societies and their websites and how to get connected with them. So that would be a great thing to download and check out and look at what's going on all over the world and finding out kind of who you could get connected to. If you had citizenship to this country, or you have family here, you speak this language and you're interested, what the missions opportunities are there, that app can actually put you in connection.
Okay. The All Nations app. Where would a person find that? It's on the
App Store, Apple and Google Play. Okay. I don't have my phone right on me, but I'm pretty certain it's the All Nations app.
Okay. Yeah. I think Doug was talking about it in Orlando, wasn't he? Wasn't he mentioning that? Okay. Got it.
All Nations.
Okay. So there's a question I forgot to ask. What are you guys doing when you get to Berlin? Are you guys leading a Bible talk? Are you guys just going to be doing nothing and kind of assimilating yourself into the culture? Are you leading the church? Like what role are you stepping into?
So initially, we are going to be focusing on the younger ministries within the church, specifically the campus and the young professionals and young marrieds. But we will be working alongside the leadership team, which is primarily made up of lay leaders who are just incredible, faithful disciples who have been in the Berlin church for many, many years. We'll be working alongside of them to kind of learn the culture of the church. And the vision is that in the next year or two, we would take over leadership of that group and kind of start overseeing leadership of the whole church. So we're kind of baby stepping our way to that. But initially, we're going to come in and they want us to be able to just focus on the ministries that we're familiar with, because although the Berlin church is fairly significant for a small church, it's about 130 disciples. Yeah. The campus and the young professionals ministries are very, very small. And so there's a ton of kind of untapped harvests there that they want us to be able to come and just walk alongside these really incredible, faithful young Christians to help them get some momentum and build up those ministries.
Okay, so are you going to be? So what I hear you saying is you're going to start with a ministry you've been familiar with, and then just see how it goes, develop relationships with the other leaders, and then with the church, and then over time, the plan is if all goes well and there's a good fit, you're going to step up to be the leader of the church in the future.
Yeah.
There's no timeline. There's no timeline, but that's kind of the plan. They're looking for a full-time leader. Okay, that's really exciting. 130 people there. You're going to be going to German school when you're there? Like, how are you preparing language-wise?
Yeah, right now we're just on Duolingo and stuff like that. But when we get there, we're going to be a part of our job will be going to class, learning German. Yeah. So that's kind of a big objective in the first year is learning as much as we can.
That's exciting. I studied German in high school, and I wanted to go when I was at Berkeley. I was planning on going for a 1-year exchange to Germany.
Oh,
and
wow.
I can't remember the exchange society. It totally escapes me, but I became a Christian, and then my plans changed, somewhat. But I wanted to go on the mission team to Munich. There was a mission team at that time and was going to meetings, but anyway, I can't remember how I got sidetracked from that, but it ended up not going. But that's so awesome you guys are going. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to that point, if I could just say, there are so many disciples in the States who took German in high school or took Spanish or took Japanese. Like, if that's you, seriously, reach out to some of these leaders of these churches, these places. They need people to come in who are just faithful and maybe want to spend a year studying abroad. Like, if you speak German, call me.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
Rob, if you want to come, man, we'll take you to Berlin.
I would love that. If a person wanted to reach you, how would they get a hold of you?
Yeah, my email is just austenbolves@gmail.com, AUSTENBOLVES. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me.
Sarah, if someone wanted to talk to you about this decision they're thinking about, how would they reach you?
Same. Email would be great. It's just sarah.bolves@gmail.com, SARA.BOLVES@gmail.
Okay, so there's no H. It's just SARA.
There's no H.
Okay, good to know. Okay. So this is so thrilling what you guys are doing. There's actually a couple in our church that wants to go and work self-supporting in Frankfurt.
Oh, wow.
And so they're hoping to go in this next year. A really young couple, super talented, and they're planning on getting a job over there and going. So I think that's what's exciting is, like, regardless of your age, talking to you guys, I go, man, I want to go overseas. I'm sitting here kind of processing on the side, like, where can I go? That'd be really exciting. It's awesome. The thing that really impresses me about you guys is it's just not easy to make a decision to just uproot. You're in a very comfortable situation. You're in a position of influence, but then just to change everything and go to a situation where you don't speak the language, you're not familiar with the culture, you're in a very vulnerable situation, and then especially with kids. I go, man, you guys have got guts. But I go, that must fire up God so much. I just go, that's fantastic. So all the best to you guys in that one. But let me ask this final question. What advice would you give to a person who wants to make this life count? I want to hear from both of you guys.
Yeah, I know you end every show with this, so I was thinking about it. I do think that question that I voiced earlier of how can you live a life to have the most impact for God? That's the question you're asking is how can they? But I think too few people actually ask that question and then walk through with what the answer is.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Like, so many folks, they think, I think it would be this, but I got to make money or the kids, but my parents might not. There's so many reasons to not. And that's what Jesus challenges his disciples to consider. That's Luke 14, counting the cost is, you gotta hate your own life even,
right,
if you want to be a disciple. And so I think having that question in your mind, trying to answer it, and then honestly, just the faith and commitment to Jesus. When you figure out what the answer is, are you willing to do it?
Right.
That's been essential for us. That's something we've come back to so many times. We've had so many advisors along the way to make sure we're not just being crazy, but actually people who have helped us to guide and shape that. So it's not just, in my own head, here's what sounds fun, but no, really feeling like it's a calling and knowing that. But I think, just being willing to answer that question. And then if God reveals the answer, letting Jesus be Lord and going with it.
Amen. Yeah. And I think when I was wrestling whether or not to go to law school or go into the ministry, I had a conversation with Lynn Ottenwaller at Camp Hope for Kids. And she asked me, what sets your soul on fire? And immediately what came to my mind was studying the Bible with women and watching the Bible change their life. And she said, well, then you should probably do something where you get to do that a lot.
Right.
And I kept thinking about that. And, I think it's something different for every single person. I think God needs disciples in every area of human life.
Right.
Which is why he's made us all so different, which is why he's given us all such different gifts and talents and interests. But I really believe, it's similar to what Austen said, but I think we have to decide what really sets my soul on fire. Not just what do I like to do, what's fun for me, what's comfortable for me, what burns within me to make me feel like I can't help but do this in service to God's kingdom.
Wow.
And when you figure out what that is, then go after it and don't let anything hold you back from it, because that's how you're going to be used most powerfully to build up God's kingdom, whatever your job is or realm of life that you're in.
Right. Guys, that's some pretty awesome advice there. I totally agree with you, Austen. I feel like first of all, we have dreams, we have desires. That'd be cool to go overseas. But it's the ability to execute, to actually put wheels on it, to actually set it in motion. That's what's scary. And I'm sure there were some times when you sent out the emails, you're like, oh, did we just do that? Oh my gosh. And then people saying, yeah, we'd like you to come. Like all of a sudden you're hearing that song, that old gospel song, no turning back, no turning back.
Yeah.
That's when it gets scary. It's like all of a sudden you realize you've set something in motion that it's not going to be easy to stop. And it's so easy for people just to get as close as they can to that point without really committing anything to it. And so that's awesome advice. And Sarah, what I hear you saying is what a great, simple question. What sets your soul on fire? And then you should be doing something where you can do that regularly. I go, that is so simple and yet so powerful. It just removes the murkiness, the haziness. And it just all of a sudden, I feel the same way, studying the Bible with people, changing people's lives. I go, that's why I went into the ministry, and that's why I stay in the ministry. So anyway, I could keep talking, but I'm so excited for you guys, and I'm so inspired by what you're doing. And I hope thousands of others follow in your footsteps. I hope, it's my dream. I'd love to see 1 million people in our family of churches by 2050. But it starts with people like you just going, okay, we're not going to choose what's comfortable. We're going to choose what's challenging. We're going to choose what's exciting. We're going to try to advance God's kingdom. So I'm going to just pray every blessing that I can on your heads, that everything you do just turns to gold. So thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us, man.
We're so grateful.
Thank you for listening. If you're enjoying this podcast, I'd like to ask your help. First, hit the subscribe button. Secondly, post the episode and its link on your favorite social media site and let your friends know about the program. Thirdly, read and review one of my books, How to Plant and Grow a Church, or Courage, How to Make This Life Count. You can find both of these on Amazon.com. Finally, email me if you have any life advice you'd like me to address, or if you have a topic or person you'd like to hear on the program. Because my goal is to inspire you to make this life count, live a no regrets life, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Have a great day and make this life count.